Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. My name's Maria Brophy, and today I want to share with you one of the fascinating parts of the story when my husband was in the hospital, COVID ICU, and how Spirit brought me answers when I was praying and praying and praying because the doctor had just asked me to sign a paper to pull life support. My husband had been on the ventilator for 9 days at this point, and I knew with every bit of my soul that the COVID protocol gave my husband almost a 0% chance of surviving at this point. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed for answers. And one day, an answer came to me in the most unusual way. And that brings me to my guest today. And Miss Laura Zook, I'm going to have her help me tell the story of how we met through text and how she gave me two bits of information that helped to save my husband's life on a ventilator in the COVID ICU. So, Laura, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. I love talking about this. I think there's so many things that you did amazing that other people can learn from. So I just love your book. I would love hearing what happened on your side of things. And thank you for having me on so we can talk about the side I saw, you know?
Right. So, there's so many things you and I want to talk about today, but I want to start with the story of how we met in December of 2021. And I'll start with I got a text from some woman I never met before named Laura Zook. And the text said, "Hey, we have a mutual friend. I heard your husband's critically ill, and I think I can help." Laura, how did you find me and what compelled you to send me this text?
During that time, my goal was to help anyone and everyone in the community that reached out. And so over time, I was started to have a reputation of having answers and sort of serving as like a concierge to prevent people from going into the hospital, delivering things that they need, care kits. If they were in the hospital, preventing them from ICU because we knew what was happening in ICU, those outcomes were not great. And then if they were under the vent, getting them off the vent, which we know was, I mean, what is it? 9 out of 10 did not make it. I mean, I don't know the statistics depending on who you ask. It's 7 out of 10. It's not, I think it was really a dire situation. And I heard about Drew through a friend from church who had heard about Drew. And she texted me and said, "You got to help this woman."
And you did. So when I got that text from you, at first I thought, I don't know this person. Why is she going to give me medical advice? Right. And then you kept texting me and you said, "Look, I have an answer of what will save your husband." And of course, that got my attention. And then I had family members saying, "Why are you going to listen to this stranger you don't even know?" But there was a part of me that said, "Yeah, why would I listen to this person I don't know?" But there was another part of me, my intuition part, that said, "I've been praying for an answer. Maybe this is God's answer to some of my prayers. Maybe this woman has some information that's going to help my husband live." And the most recent statistic that I've read about people who are put on the ventilator with COVID, in the first 4 days, 85% die. Now, that was the most recent statistic that I read. At the time, I didn't know that. And at the time that I got your text, my husband had been on the vent for 10 days. And you had texted me right after the doctor had urged me to pull life support and let him die. So the information you gave me was so simple, but difficult to get the doctors to agree to. So Why don't you tell the audience what you texted me, the instructions were that you sent me?
I knew that you, first of all, wouldn't believe me. And then, second of all, I really knew that the doctors would not believe me because I had already gone through this exact approach with my brother, who was in the same hospital, actually. And he was pre ICU and he was in very, very bad shape. And so I was feverishly researching answers. I knew the protocols that were being used in the hospitals. I knew what was working, what was not. And I also knew that in the most dire situation, or even in the not dire, so pre hospital situation, we were seeing that high dose vitamin C IV was helping reduce the inflammation caused by COVID. And it was also helping with the viral load. And so, but in Drew's situation, it was super urgent, and it needed to be really done quickly, obviously, as well as with a certain amount. Like it couldn't be a little bit. A little bit would not have gone far enough. And so I knew that you had to legally compel the doctors to do so because other doctors weren't doing that. So it wasn't enough to get you on board, to get the doctors on board, um, and with the right protocol. It was, we didn't have time to argue about it, and we needed to legally compel them to do so.
One thing that you did that really helped me was you gave me language to put in a legal sounding letter to the doctors, telling them this is what I'm requesting: high dose vitamin C of 20 grams, infusion, 7 day infusion of 20 grams. So I was very, in the letter, it was very specific. You said to use the right to try law. That is a fairly new law, only a few years old, that says if your loved one is dying and so far nothing's saving them, you have the right to try anything. So he fit under that. He was dying. He was as good as dead. And then the other thing that you had me put in the letter was NIH data, which is our National Institute of Health data, so our own governmental data. So it's backed up by science, medical science that's approved by all of our governmental medical blah 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 agencies, right? And you giving me the language to put in that letter was so incredibly helpful because I would have never figured that on my own quickly. I would have eventually, but most people, when your loved one is dying, your brain is not working. You are in constant panic mode. Couldn't think clearly. I needed other people to think for me. And so, but
And that's
Laura,
why
it's so
a bossy person, because I was like, do this, let me know if you did it, do that, because I knew your brain probably was in overwhelm mode. And it was a safe enough with actually some results. So I didn't get this out of nowhere. Yes, the NIH has research on it that was compelling, but it was also the FLCCC, so Frontline Critical Care something. They had a protocol that I was really getting out to as many people as I could. It was, early intervention. That's, Dr. McCullough was really talking about early intervention early on. And then it was also something for severe COVID. They were using high dose vitamin C IV. So this didn't come out of nowhere. And then on top of it, I watched my brother respond to it. So he had a very super high CRP number. And we just watched every day that get cut in half and cut in half. It's supposed to be under 1, Maria. I think Drew was something insane, like 11, or I don't know if you know his
I don't
CRP.
remember, but he was like, it was so bad the doctors wanted to pull the plug because he just had no chance of living. So when your brother was in the same hospital that Drew was in, um, I wonder if they had the same doctors group.
They
No.
did. No.
Okay.
Right.
I
And
mean, not that it matters. The protocol is the same regardless of the doctor group, but I was just
they
curious
were
about that.
all resistant to it. And so I
Yes.
had already had to go through the approval process with him and also coach him because he was awake and he was his own advocate.
Yeah.
So, but now you're Drew's advocate. And, I didn't know this on the other side until I read your book, but you had a really hard time delivering that letter.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That is covered in my book, COVID, a Love Story, by the way. Anybody who's listening, pick up a copy if you haven't. It's about the whole ordeal. Anyway, there were two main doctors that I talked to almost every day. And so I had to get the letters to them. I put the letters in two different packets for one for each doctor, drive to the hospital. I go to the receptionist. The receptionist said, "Ma'am, there's no way to get a letter to a doctor here." I said, "What? What do you mean there's no way to get a letter to a doctor? What, would you want to give me their home addresses? Like, how do I get them? Ma'am, there's just no way." And I go, "Okay, can I have their email addresses?" "They don't have emails, ma'am." I was like, "What? How do they communicate with the patient's family?" That's so bizarre. At that point, I was allowed in the hospital room. So I went into, believe it or not, I they were letting me in the COVID unit for a very short period of time. And that particular day I was able to go in. And actually, yeah, anyway, I was allowed in the hospital room at that time. So I went in, I asked the nurse with the packet, how can I get this to the doctor like now? Because this is urgent. To save his life, we need to move. And she said, "You're just going to have to leave it in the room and he'll see it." So I taped it to the wall and I took a picture.
Well, the
Um,
picture is the key thing. So
yeah,
taping it to the wall is one thing, but taking the picture is the next thing, and then letting them know that you took the
yeah,
picture.
yeah. And the good thing about photos, there's timestamps on photos. Um, so it took a while, and at the moment I cannot remember how many days it took. Quite, I did have to battle. And at that time, I was still recovering from a bad bout of COVID myself. I had brain fog. I was so panicked because my husband's dying. I hadn't slept in weeks. I hadn't eaten. At that point, I weighed like 120 pounds. I lost so much weight. My clothes didn't fit me. I mean, I was not well because of the stress.
Yeah.
And you kept texting me like every day. What did the doctor say? What did the doctor say? And then I'd say, "Oh, they said they're giving him vitamin C already." And then you texted me back and said, "Ask them how much. If it's anything less than 10 grams, tell them that's not enough." So I asked the doctor, and the doctor said 1.5 grams. And thanks to you, I said, "That's not enough to stamp out infection." And so I had to keep fighting, but finally, I got them to agree to 7 days of high dose vitamin C. And guess what? By day 5, I find out they had discontinued it on day 3.
Oh,
So then I had to battle again and I had them do it all over again. And the second time, because see, what they were doing was they were lying to me. And at the time, I didn't know it. I was so innocent. I
right.
had I would never even think
Of
anybody would
course.
lie, right? And now I know they lied to me.
But you
Um,
knew it shouldn't be
because
completely.
of all the shenanigans that just continued to go on. But at the time, I thought it was innocent, and I just didn't question it. But then I fought for it all over again. So they did get 2 rounds. But it's funny, you kept bugging me by text saying, "Did they do it yet? Did they do it yet? Did they do it yet?"
Yes, because I already didn't trust them. And I already knew that you could be having a hard time. And it was important. I was looking at the end result, which is I knew that it could work. I wanted it to work so bad. And we needed this miracle for him. He's such an amazing human. And at the time I did not know him, but I do believe God was in this the whole way because maybe even I was being that assertive because I was being led. So I had prayed at that time on a daily basis, Holy Spirit, guide me the way you want me to use me during this time. Like I just completely surrendered to being used to be of service. And so that could have been, I don't even remember how many texts I must have sent you, but I remember.
So many, so many. And my sister-in-law was so annoyed. I remember saying, it is kind of odd, but I kept thinking, this is an answer to my prayer. The spiritual side of me, the intuition side, the side that was starting to believe in prayer, told me that this was an answer to my prayers. And so I stopped telling my sister-in-law. So at that point, I stopped telling her about your text. I stopped telling her about you at all.
I'm
For
so
everybody who's listening, it's the really fun part of this story. This was December of 2021. Laura and we didn't communicate after February of 2022, and we had never met. I didn't even know what you look like. We didn't communicate again until September of 2025 when I woke up one morning. I remember it's so funny. I woke up, I sat up in bed and I thought about you and I thought, oh my God, I never thanked that woman for helping me save Drew's life. Did I? Did I thank her? And I start looking through my phone, and my phone saves all my old texts.
good.
And I saw that I actually did kind of thank you. But then after that, I had moved on to other fires to put out with Drew,
Yeah,
and I had
recovery.
forgotten about you for a while. So So that morning in September of 2025, I texted Laura and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, Maria Brophy. You helped me save my husband's life. I just want you to know I really appreciate you helping me. And I don't know if I ever properly thanked you. And by the way, I wrote a book. So I texted you all this. By the way, I wrote a book. And you texted back, I know, I just read it. Right? Didn't you? You said something like, I just read it. Or
Well, so
or you were getting ready to read it or something.
I'm so glad, first of all, that you listened and you took the advice and went with it. I was so grateful for that. And then I was so grateful to see that he made it through the dangerous parts and then continued to make it through each one. And I just followed you on, social media. I didn't want to, intervene or bother you, until it was time, until I felt like there would be a time later when it made sense. And so when you texted me, it made me so happy. Because sometimes you do things to not be acknowledged. You do things truly from your heart to give and not to receive anything back, but it did feel so good to be like acknowledged and get to know you and get to know Drew. And so I remember getting the text and I was just like so happy. But yes, I knew you wrote a book and I didn't even think you would put this part in. So
And
I
it's in
thought,
chapter
may not apply.
23. Well, it's
Yes.
a big part of the miracle story. Chapter 23,
I
Vitamin C is the title of the chapter. And I did change your name of the book to protect your because I changed a lot of names in the books if I didn't know for sure it was okay to use the real name. So you are Kayla in my book, but if I ever reprint the book, I'll put your real name in there with your permission.
I love Sheila too.
And then so that day I texted you and I said, in September of 2025, and I said we should meet in person someday. And you said, how about today? And so you came to my art gallery. We hung out for 3 long hours, and then you met some of my other friends. You got to meet Drew, and now you and I are like best
I know.
friends. Here
And
we
it's
are, all this time later. It's so like
it, it's really
weird how life works.
Mhm.
So I want to say one more thing about the high dose vitamin C. Now, with Drew's critical condition, there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle that helped save his life. That was the first thing that made a difference. And how do I know that? You never really know, like, if the things that you do work because the doctors aren't going to tell you if it's something you fought them for, right? Because they just don't. Now, there's a lot of reasons why. But anyway, after Drew came home from the hospital in a wheelchair in March of 2022, and a few months after he came home, one of his COVID ICU nurses came to visit. Her name's Nurse Ari. She came to visit us, and we had gotten really close to her. She's a lovely lady. And she saw Drew alive, moving, walking. And she just started crying, saying, "Oh my God, Drew, I can't believe you're alive." And I was actually a little taken aback by this reaction because I knew he was critical, but I think I didn't realize that he had like a 1% chance of living. Like nobody actually told me that. But she knew it. And I said, first I had two questions for her. The first one was, what made you so sure he wasn't going to make it? And she said, every single patient we had that was as severe as him died. Not one of them went home. I never saw a patient go home. And then the second question I asked her was, what do you think saved his life? And I thought for sure she was going to say it was his strong will to live. But she shocked me. She said it was the high dose vitamin C. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe she said that because I had fought so hard for it and all the whole hospital was against it. And so I just assumed she was against it too. And she said that well, she's going to school to get her doctorate to be an MD. But one of her studies was all about high dose vitamin C, stamping out infection, especially in patients with sepsis and severe infection, how high dose vitamin C infusions stamp out infection that would otherwise kill you. So she knew that's what saved him. And that's when I knew it because prior to that, I
Yeah.
didn't know. I didn't know for sure. Nobody had confirmed that for me.
Right. And that's why I thought maybe you wouldn't have included it in your book because maybe you didn't know, but I knew, and that was enough for me. And I was just so grateful that he made it. And now I'm even more so grateful because I feel like this is one of those moments in life where you learn so much, but especially get closer to God. And Drew has such an amazing message. You have such an amazing message. And now this can help so many people. I mean, this book is anyone who had a COVID experience, which I think is everyone, should read this book. It is so healing. There's so much nuggets of wisdom. You had such tenacity and such a backbone and such courage that I think all men and women need to learn if they are advocating for a loved one in the hospital. Because it was not enough for you to pray for help and then receive help and have intuition that maybe this was the right help and have belief that, Drew was going to come home. You had to take the steps to battle, and to be a warrior. And that is what we need others to see and learn because it's okay to question the doctor, the experts. It's okay to not be super, polite and friendly. Like that's not the time. This is an urgent time with Drew. And so that's why it was not about being nice for me. It was about being assertive and getting it done. And so, but now we can hang out and be polite and and socialize
Well, and
a little bit.
I'm so passionate about this topic because I lived it, right? And I almost lost the person that is more important to me than anything in the world. And I did grow a backbone in the beginning of the ordeal when he first went in the hospital, the first 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. I was this, I was afraid to go against the doctors. I was, had some people in my life telling me, trust the doctors, kind of telling me to be quiet, Maria, be quiet, Maria.
Trust the doctors, sure, but partner with the doctors. Like, you need to not go to sleep at the wheel. Like, partner with them, learn what they're doing. I love that you wrote down everything that they were giving him. Like, you need to be also a doctor, even whether you have the education or not, to pay attention and
Yeah.
to challenge and to ask questions. And like you said, not just be quiet, but have a backbone and speak up. Like, he didn't have a voice. You had to be his voice.
I knew that it was up to me to make sure he lived. And
Well,
and it's a really hard position to be in when you don't have a medical background. And all I knew was 1.6 million people died on the COVID protocol in the United States. So it didn't work.
something was not working.
It was very logical to me that if we followed the COVID protocol exactly, he would die. That's kept echoing in my mind over and over again. But if we do something different, he'll have a little bit of a chance. That was why I was just seeking out all these different
It's
ways to
more
save him.
it was more popular and more comfortable to follow the mainstream thought. It's not comfortable to challenge, it's not comfortable to go outside the mold, but it was, in this case, a life-saving scenario to step
You
out.
you wouldn't believe. I just did a post on my Instagram, COVID love story Instagram page the other day, where I show a little clip of him on the ventilator in the hospital bed, and it says something like, when the doctor asks you to sign the papers, pull life support, it's very important you say hell no.
Yes.
And
Oh no.
half the comments are people saying, I would want to die. I would want you to let me die. It's wrong to make these choices for your loved one. And I'm like, do you
Yeah.
like that's crazy? My husband, we just went to Panama on vacation. He just had the one of the best surfs of the last 10 years of his life, surfing giant waves at a place called Dumpers in Bocas del Toro. He'd be dead if I thought that way. There are some people you can't save, but who am I to make that call? I'm not ever going to give in on this. Like, I'm never going to give on this. Like, yes, it's true. My husband could have come home and been in a wheelchair the rest of his life. Is that worthy of death? Should we let him die? Should we kill him because he's in a wheelchair? I mean, I, I'd still
Well,
take
I
him.
want to bring up, that's a really important part of it, is like, what is the best choice here? Quality of life. Does he have an option for quality of life later? Is he going to make it anyway? Should we just go ahead and put him out of his misery now, put him to, but you had more than belief and commitment to him to fight. You put pictures up of his life on, and I love that, how you put pictures up all in his room, so not just he could feel it and you could feel it, but everybody working on him could see that he had a life outside. And I love that when the nurse said, "Oh," and she was sweet to say, "Oh, he was a surfer." Like, it just rolled out, and you said, "No, he is a surfer." And that is so critically important, to hold that vision and hold that belief of he will surf again. And it was only because of that that you went to Panama and he did surf again. It's like
Yeah.
beautiful to see how all that played out. And maybe you were viewed as like, "Oh, that's silly, lady. I mean, I'll let you hope, but that's a false hope." And it's like, no, I believe that he's going to surf again, and I see that vision and hold that vision, and it's possible.
Important thing of that, when you have that belief, You don't take advice from people who don't share that belief. So that's why I didn't listen to the doctors. They didn't share, they kept telling me, Mrs. Brophy, now that your husband hasn't died, choose a nursing home because he'll never get off the ventilator and he's going to be in a nursing home for the rest of his life. And I said, oh, hell no, that's not going to happen. Whenever they gave me advice, I didn't take it because their advice came from him being debilitated for the rest of his life. So I looked for people smarter than me with a medical degree that believed in the possibility of him surfing again, of him breathing without a machine again, of him coming home and walking again. And that's important. And a lot of people don't get that. They just want to say, well, okay, so great for you guys. You had a great outcome, but most people don't. Well, that's because they take the advice of the people who think they're going to die.
Well, the first step to having a good outcome is to believe in the outcome you want. So starting with what is that perfect outcome that I want and holding that belief and then working towards it and also allowing others, the right people. So it gives them at least the chance, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to do that and letting people speak on Drew with another outcome was just not going to help. So might as well have them. And he was surrounded by so much love and support and community and prayer. And like, so that was an extraordinary thing too. It's not just the vitamin C, it is the community, God, his will. Like it was multiple things, but you had a better chance because you had the right sort of mindset and belief and the courage to like walk that walk to
Yeah.
get him to the other side of this.
I was propped up by a lot of human angels, you being one of them. And I'm really blessed. I have a lot of strong women in my life. And anytime I felt like I was going to give up, which was quite often, you can only take so much. I would call, I would let my friends know, and sometimes three of them would come over at once and they'd cook me dinner and they'd pray with me, something I never used to do. I mean, I never prayed with people before. I would, I've always like prayed alone, but they would, they would just lift me up in so many ways and not let me give up. When I think about all the things that are important to have in your life. Have your health, be strong now. So if something happens to you, you'll recover better. But also be surrounded by strong, loving, awesome people so that if you ever need support, you've got a support system already there. And of course be the support system for other people. People always they always ask Drew, like, how did you get through this, get through the really difficult recovery? And he talks about how all these people helped him, and he talked about how you have to be somebody before anything bad happens in your life. You have to be somebody that people want to help.
Mm.
Like Laura, I'm sure if you ever end up with a situation in your life where you need help, you're going to have a lot of people by your side because you've always given. I mean, I'll be number one, I'll be right there.
Oh,
Um, because you've done so much to help so many people, and that comes back, you know?
yeah, I think that is true. It comes back tenfold sometimes even. But Drew has been giving so much of his talent and his kindness and who he is as a person. And I think that that's people knew that he's so authentic and genuine. And he was such an athlete. How could this happen to Drew, this artist, this athlete, this beautiful, kind person? How could this happen to Maria, his wife, who's so beautiful and loyal and fun? And so everybody, I think, wanted to do their part and to help. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing you guys before. I just was like, let me help these people. And hopefully, this brings, out this is the best outcome that I imagined actually was to see him, make it through and also be closer to God. And then a bonus is to get to know you guys. It's like your book is so beautiful with all the characters and all of the people that played a part for which I didn't know until I read it. And it was just like, wow, what a story.
It's a crazy story. It's a wild story. It's an amazing, inspiring. Um,
Yes.
let's switch gears for just a second. We've got a few minutes left. For somebody who is dealing with a loved one in the ICU, they feel like there's more that could be done. That the situation looks dire. Can you give just a little description of the right to try law in the United States that could help them?
Yeah. And I think I would like to explain before the right to try, you first have to have you know, an open mind to sort of complementary alternative therapies. The hospital protocol isn't the only option. There are so many other approaches. We have our Western approach. There's some Eastern approaches. There's some, therapies that seem simple that could be super powerful. And so being open to understanding that some of these therapies may even not have as much attention in research that others do because they didn't have the funding for it. For example, vitamin C is actually very low cost and there's no patent to it. So why would there be a body to do research on it except for maybe the NIH who did the, complementary alternative medicine type research for which we need more, but being open to that there are other options. And then let's say you find an option that you want to try, then you can leverage the right to try legislation. And that is something that Trump put in, I think, I don't know, 5 or so, his first term. There's some more work to be done there with that legislation. And there's some other legislation out there right now that they're trying to get it to where psychedelics can be used for ADHD, especially for our veterans. But because it's a substance that's banned, they can't get access to it. But there's a lot of examples of psychedelics helping with ADHD and severe trauma. So it's like very interesting to open your mind to all of these other ways that you could, address and help people heal. So yeah, the right to try is something to learn about, to read about, and to leverage, if you need to leverage it.
I had never heard of it before you told me in 2021. Um, and it's amazing because then after I used it for the high dose vitamin C, then I used the right to try law to get Drew another drug that helped heal his lungs from severe COVID pneumonia and lung infections. He had multiple infections and a collapsed lung. And now he's breathing and surfing and holding his breath underwater for long periods of time. And like he's, I believe that drug, it's called a Viptidil. It's an experimental drug. I think that is what helped heal his lungs well enough to where he can do all that stuff.
Is it peptide?
Yeah, it is. I didn't even know that until like a month ago. I didn't know a Viptidil is actually a peptide.
Well,
And
there's so much with the peptide world now coming, like that is opening up a whole nother space
yeah,
to explore. But the fact that he had that, I don't know, just a repair of his lungs, which
yeah.
was not being done at other places. Let's ask the question, why? Why was that not widely available? Why? Let's not let that happen again. Let's
Oh,
make sure we're educating ourselves and
yeah.
that we have legislation in place to protect us should we need these other alternatives like a peptide, like high dose vitamin C IV. And there's others. I've been in the alternative health space for 30 years. So, I mean, there's other stories that I have of medical miracles. Drew's my favorite one. Your story is amazing. But I have other amazing stories of when you leverage, Western medicine, which has some greatness with complementary alternative, like that is the best way for healing.
Well, I think this was great. We're gonna do this again because we still have so much more we can talk
No,
about.
wait, there's more.
There is so much more. There really is. Like it's amazing. So thank you, Laura, not just for this conversation here, but thank you for helping me save Drew's life. Thank you for being that person texting me nonstop, making me take the action. Um,
Sorry, sorry.
I really appreciate it. I do. And it just shows me like when you know something's going to help somebody, maybe it's worth it to bug the heck out of them until they actually get it because you're saving a life. And yeah, I appreciate that. I really do.
Especially if the other side is going to be open to it. If someone continues to say, I have a rule where I will offer, and then they may kind of think about it, and then I'll offer again and present evidence, and then they kind of, nah, I'm not sure, and I offer one last time. So I have a 3-time rule. So I think you opened up on like 2.5 of our, in between two.
I actually was interested the first from
Oh,
the
good.
very beginning. I was. Um, it's just the doctors made it so hard. I was just like running. I felt like I was just getting hit in the head with a baseball bat. Like it was so exhausting fighting, but it was worth it. It was worth it because I got my husband back. So
Amazing.
thank you. And I want to thank everybody listening. And hey, if you learned anything new today, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and hey, click the link to my book, COVID a Love Story. It'll open your mind a little more and find out all the miracles that happen around this story. Thanks, Laura. Love ya. Looking forward to hanging out again soon.